Shalom, shalom, shalom. This is Rabbi Moshe Otero with the Ways of Israel. Welcome to this video. We are in chapter 6 doing a review of the dietary laws. It's very important that you read the actual chapters in the book to be a Jew, and we're just reviewing some of the main points in chapter 6. Now, we know that what you put in your mouth can actually bring blessings or not blessings to your life. This is a dietary laws that God gave the Jewish people. And it's really a diet for the soul, not only for the body, but mainly for the soul. Kashrut is a Hebrew word that refers to the Jewish dietary laws. It's a variation of the word kosher, which means fit or proper in accordance with religious laws. Any food that satisfies the requirement of Jewish law is fit for eating. It's also considered kosher, fit. The expression kosher style is very misleading. Matter of fact, I had someone tell me the other day that, I don't keep kosher, but I keep kosher style. And I kept scratching my head. I go, well, tell me what you do when you just eat kosher style. What's that? And explain to me, I basically don't buy kosher chicken, but it's kosher style. I cook it like if it was kosher. And I said, no, that's not kosher style. Kosher style is completely no style at all. Basically, you're eating no kosher, calling it kosher style because you're eating within the list that we'll take a look at of animals that's permitted to eat. But it's not enough just to eat from the list. It's also a process in which how will we kill the animal so it's fit for Jewish consumption. All of that we'll take a look at in this chapter of dietary laws and much more. The expression kosher style is misleading and very deceptive. Kosher does not stand for an ethnic way of cooking for certain taste. It's a religious term which has specific religious meanings. It's applicably determined to set religious criteria in the forefront of our way of eating. Either a food is kosher or it's not. Whether the term kosher style is used, the inference is clear. Although the reference may not be a favorite to Jewish dishes, they are not kosher. Actually, the word kosher in religious literature is applied to so many different items that is prepared according to Jewish law or halacha. Thus, we find the expression as a kosher Torah, kosher tefillin, a kosher mezuzah, a kosher talit, meaning that they have been made properly, satisfying the requirements of Jewish law, and therefore are suitable for ritual and religious use. A decent person who lives life in accordance with religious teachings in every respect is called a kosher person, Adam Kasher. It's colloquially used in English to refer to meaning as correct or proper, a kosher deal. It's very true to its classical Hebrew usage. Nevertheless, the term is widely used mainly in the area or in the industry of food, and it is this context that we shall use the word kosher. For the same reason, we shall use the word treifa to designate everything which is not kosher, although in Jewish term the term is technically applied only to animals whose organs are damaged or diseased. The Jewish term or Jewish dietary law prescribes not merely a diet for the body, but it's also a diet for the soul. After all, you are what you eat. And to maintain one's spiritual well-being, I always say this, especially when it comes to pig, chazir, which many, unfortunately, of the Jews have partaken of. So you become what you eat. This is why we had the term back in the Middle Ages of calling those Jews who basically surrendered themselves to the other religion, and they called them marranos, which means pigs, because eventually it came out turning that they began to eat also chuletas de puercos, or side pieces of pig, and thus they became contaminated, their souls. But not all of them did this, by the way. A lot of them hid. They became known as crypto-Jews, or as many would call them, anusims, which we have till today. The faithful Jews observe laws of kashrut, not because he has become endeared to specific details, and not because it provides him with pleasure, nor because he considers them a good for health and healthy reasons, because the Bible offers him a clear-cut reason, no, but because he regards them as divine commandments, and he yields his will before the will of the divine and to the discipline imposed by his faith. In other words, our sages says a man ought not to say, I don't wish to eat the flesh of pig, but rather, because I don't like it, but rather he should say, I don't wish to do so, to eat any of this, because my Father in heaven has decreed otherwise. Don't eat pig. Although the benefits arising from the many inexplicable laws of God in their practice and not in the understanding of the motives. Nevertheless, the Jews never tires of pursuing his quest to fathom the divine mind and to ascertain for the reason they were prompted in the promulgation of God's law. And for man of faith, which is sure reason to exist for the divine decrees, even if they are concealed from him. Before proceeding on the quest, let's first put to rest the very widespread misconception that kashrut laws are just some ancient health measure. Oh, they did it because of their health or hygienes. Absolutely not. This may have been encouraged by the English translation of the term clean and unclean, which is used to refer to creatures that may and may not be eaten. To the viewer, Torah is a translation. The English word clean and unclean are understood in terms of physical cleanliness and uncleanliness. And the assumption is quickly drawn that all matter of hygiene. The fact is that the pig is commonly eaten domestic animals to which Jews have had a particular aversion. It is an animal which traditionally pictured as wallowing in dirt or mud, and with which the disease of trichinosis is associated, which only serves to strengthen this misconception. The special aversion to pig is more of a result of the historical factors, and not because it's a non-kosher animal, that the oppressors often tried to force upon the Jews, sometimes very successfully, as a means of denying his faith. And our historical records show many martyrs who suffered death in resistance instead of being brought over to the other side of impurity and being labeled with that complete ugly term, marranos. Simple hygiene would not explain the prohibition against eating the camel or the horse or the hare, which is rabbit, commonly eaten foods in many parts of the world, which are not any dirtier than the cow or the goat. Although the Torah permits the eating of barnyard fowls like chicken, etc., and ducks, by the way, which have no great reputation for the cleanliness either. So it has nothing to do with cleanliness. The terms used in Hebrew to designate clean and unclean animal is tahor and tamai, or tamai, which means pure and clean. These terms are never used to describe the physical cleanliness or the uncleanliness, but rather the spiritual and moral state of being, of existence. The term tamai is used only in relation to moral and religious deficiencies that contaminate the soul and character of a man, particularly incest and idol worship, to characterize the absence of ritual purity. It's often translated as defilement. The creature designated as tamai were not only forbidden as food, but also for sacrificial purposes. The English word clean and unclean are therefore to be understood as purity, as purity and defilement in a spiritual sense, and not in a physical sense. A clean tongue, for example, is a tongue that is pure, tahor, lashon tahor. A dirty mouth is a tamei, a dirty mouth, a dirty mind. Who shall ascend the mountain unto the mountain of the Lord? A man with clean hands. All provides example of how even in English the term clean and unclean are used in a moral, spiritual sense. It is in this sense that the Hebrew term tahor and tamai are used consistently in the laws of kashrut, which are to be understood. Even though some parts of the kosher code deals with diseases and organ injuries that makes an animal treifa for reasons that are clearly hygienic or health related, while Jews have never questioned the hygienic wholesomeness of dietary laws, the commandments of the Lord could not be beneficial to man in every respect, physical as well as spiritual. Hygienic and health considerations were not regarded as the primary purpose of kashrut, just the opposite. Furthermore, the limitations on creatures that could be eaten and the requirements of ritual slaughter, the removal of blood, and the mere non-cooking of meat and milk together, all of these and more do not at all support the validity of the quote-unquote theory of ancient health measures. No, this wasn't the reason why we observe these biblical and rabbinical dietary laws. The only hint or clue that the biblical text itself provides a reason for all this regulation is that in almost every instance where the foods are referred to in the Torah, we find a call to holiness. In Leviticus chapter 11, for example, for instance, the entire section which lists what may and may not be eaten, the chapter concludes, "For I am the Lord your God, sanctify yourselves and be holy, for I am holy." How can a person say he or she is a holy people and not separate themselves from unholy food, unholy items? Leviticus chapter 11, verse 44. Elsewhere, "For you are a people consecrated to the Lord your God." What makes the Jewish people different? It is that God has given us a series of laws that separate us from the norm. "You shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk." Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 21. "And you shall be holy men to me, therefore you shall not eat flesh torn by beast in the field." We don't eat roadkill or animals that died of itself or in the field. The latter directive is part of the section dealing with the acts of justice and righteousness, which too have the purpose of sanctifying the people. You want to be holy? It starts with what goes into your mouth, believe it or not. The idea of holiness is reinforced by the Torah relating these laws to caution against defilement, the opposite of holiness. For not only are we forbidding creatures designated as tamai, but Israel is repeated to warn not to defile itself by this means, not to make itself tamai with them, as is indicated in Leviticus chapter 11, verse 43 through 44. The emphasis upon the holiness as the reason or the purpose of these kashrut regulation deserves to be better understood and appreciated, for it's an integral part of the whole of the picture of Judaism, and it has many ramifications. We need to distinguish between the beast which is eaten and the beast which is not to be eaten. Leviticus chapter 11, verse 47. In this aspect of the broader requirements that Israel learns to distinguish between clean, tahor, or rather unclean, tamai, and tahor, clean, not only in food, but all areas of life, which includes the sexual, the moral, the ethical, the spiritual. Yes, there is, as Rabbi Shmuley Boteach wrote a book called Kosher Sex. There's also kosher business ethics. So there's a whole bunch of series of things that we've delved into in Jewish law to live a complete, whole, kosher existence. Kosher is not bad. Maybe expensive, but it's not bad. To treat kashrut in isolation is really to distort and misunderstand it. In Judaism, holiness does not mean ascetic or saintly withdrawal from life, just the opposite. Holiness does not insist upon self-denial or any legitimate human pleasure, nor total repression of any bodily drives, but neither does it condone self-indulgence, gluttony, and drunkenness, or hallmark of stubborn, rebellious, and incorrigible hardness of sons that basically were completely unable to be reformed. We'll find this passage in Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 18 through 21. They were regarded as abomination, to'eva, the lack of self-control. the readiness to satisfy one's cravings, regardless of their merit, propriety, legality, were indicative of the spiritual weakness and moral decay. Holiness meant and means becoming master over one's passion, self-discipline, or rather disciplined by the divine order, so that in the command and control of them and not they of him. In other words, we don't let our passions control us, but we control our passions. The one who has been trained to resist cravings for forbidden food and tempts him may also have been strengthened in his capacity to resist cravings for forbidden sexual involvement that may tempt him also. It's also strengthens his capacity to resist forbidden and unethical actions that may hold forth the promise of tempting financial or status rewards. The transference of this religious discipline to other areas is not guaranteed, but there's no denying of the inherent value in a religious discipline intended to train one to resist bodily drive and urges to satisfy a craving or experience in pleasure. The biblical call to holiness is reflected by Judaism's attempt to elevate the satisfaction of all basic urges for food, drink, sex, in which we differ not from a beast, onto a level worthy of a man. Kashrut is a good example of how Judaism raises even the most mundane act to the most routine activity into a religious experience. Whatever narrow-minded looks upon a pikayun, certainly in concerns with trifling kitchen matters, is really an example of how Judaism elevates the mere physical of one's appetite into a spiritual act by its emphasis of the ever-present God. Now, when we serve on the table, obviously, all that is transferred, as it were, to the altar. We consider our table, as it were, an altar. When the temple stood, sacrifices were to secure atonement for an individual. Now his table does the same. This is what it says in Hagigah 27a. This was the way it was put by one of the Talmudic sages. The symbolic signification explains the widespread custom among Jews of not sitting down upon the table. It explains the custom of not sprinkling salt upon the first morsel of bread eaten, just as was required in the ancient sacrifice, or the removing of all knives on the table before the recitation of grace, because knives are symbol of sword in war and violence. And these were forbidden on the altar and a symbol of peace. And it's for this reason, once we finish with the meal, we pick up all of the knives. A lot of people have the custom of picking up all the silverwares, probably leaving a spoon for dessert or coffee. But we find this as a practical thing that we inherited through the tradition of Judaism. We're forbidden on the altar, and the symbol of peace was always present, which is completely present, and it symbolized the ritual of purity required by the priest in the officiating at the offerings. And even during the meal, we were directed to raise the level of our conversation from that of Torah words, and they and three who ate together of words without Torah are exchanged. It is as though they ate pagan offerings. So what do we talk about on the table? Positive things. Don't bring negativity to the table. Don't bring vulgarity. Be vulgar at the table. Bring holiness, holy words, things that lift up. Bring Torah to the table. You know, I learned this week this Torah portion. You know, this happened to me. Praise God in everything, including when you serve your food at the table. The table is sanctified through the blessings and prayers which are said around about it. Jews are taught that even when you sit down to eat, you must be aware of your master and serve him faithfully. And it was forbidden to bring certain animals upon the altar to God, so it is also forbidden to do so in our table. The laws of Kashrut, for example, insist that in all of your ways know him, Proverbs chapter 3, verse 6, and he shall direct thy path, says Mishle chapter 3. But it's not sufficient to explain this until we understand even further the implication of what Jewish law and the laws of kashrut is all about. And so we're going to continue with this thought in our next video, because some of these require more than just one video. It refers to even the way we slaughter the animals, even the way that we checked out the animals, even the way the remarks that is heard. Your mouth counts what you say. Do you know if you consider something not kosher, you're not allowed to eat it? But if you put a morsel of something that you consider kosher, it's kosher. You don't need to put it into doubt again. And this, even a lot of traditional Jews have forgotten. Once you put something in your mouth, it's kosher. Once I say the blessing over, for example, anything I say, like the coffee I'm going to drink, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nehiyah bidvaro. I can't let you say, oh, that's not kosher. Even though I brought unto the assumption that it was kosher because it's coffee, and I checked all the items beforehand, I can't put into doubt, again, what I just had. It's kosher. This is why it's such a bad habit, people trying to thrust in your mouth food that you don't know what it's all about. You see, you do that to a Jew, they're going to push it back because you don't know what you're putting in their mouth. And so thus, everything that goes into our mouth, we regulate it through our own decision of accepting it or not accepting it. This is Rabbi Moshe Otero with Ways of Israel, Los Caminos de Israel. Be part of what we're doing. We're increasing our rabbinical students are being added every day. I got to create now another page for those who only speak English. This past week, Baruch Hashem, we were able to issue out 4 more smichas. Of course, we have 3 rabbis who sign off on these ordinations, individuals who have learned some of the basic rules of being a rabbi. Some of them even have congregations without going through any type of formal education. So, we have been helping them. And believe it or not, just because you got smicha doesn't mean you stop learning. Just the opposite. Your learning continues to grow in strength and strength. Smicha means that basically you are now set apart as a teacher of Torah and of strength. And we should all be happy that we have more teachers of Torah. The more we have, the more the world will be full of the knowledge of God and spread it. Now we also provide certifications for those who are moreh and morah. So if you want to be added to our group, we're more than happy to show you what we're doing. And may Hashem bless you on this Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom Mevorach.